Marhaba, shalom and welcome to the exciting podcast Israel and Palestine Unpacked that is dedicated to exploring the complexities of the ongoing political situation between Palestinians and Israelis. Throughout this podcast, we will explore unresolved issues, the human cost and the diverse experiences and perspectives of those directly affected. These discussions demand sensitivity as the emotional weight of the topic cannot be overlooked. So far, we have focused primarily on the personal stories of individuals, their experiences, struggles and views, which provide valuable insights into how lived experiences shape perceptions. Moving forward, in the near future, I aim to engage with academics, historians, journalists and writers who have examined different dimensions of this complex political landscape. Additionally, we will highlight the significant contributions of peace organizations, both locally and globally, whose work fosters understanding and offers paths towards reconciliation. This podcast approaches the subject from an academic perspective, striving to unpack and better understand the issues at hand. I am not a journalist by trade, and my interviewing skills are continually developing. With each conversation, I aim to grow through self-awareness and constructive feedback. While I may occasionally miss opportunities to further explore claims or subjects, I view these moments as steps in a learning journey that I hope will make each episode more insightful. Finally, it is important to emphasize that all views expressed are those of the interviewees alone, and do not necessarily reflect the views of this podcast. Rav Hanan Schlesinger lives in Alon Shvut, Israel, and is one of the founders of Roots, or, as it's known in Hebrew and Arabic, as Shorashim or Judur, the Palestinian-Israeli grassroots initiative for understanding nonviolence and transformation. Currently, he serves as its Director of International Relations. He also is the founder of the American Friends of Roots, a multi-faith organization dedicated to supporting the work of the organization. Rav Hanan frequently speaks in the US together with one of his Palestinian partners about the amazing work of Roots. Prior to the founding of Roots, Rabbi Hanan spent his whole career teaching Jewish studies in various seminaries, colleges and frameworks in the Jerusalem area, among them the Pardes Institute, Beit Midrash Elul, Nishmat and Yeshivat Badain. He also spent 2 years as part of the Judaic Fellows Program in Boca Raton, Florida, and 10 years in Dallas, Texas. First as Rosh Kollel of the Community Kollel, and later as founder and executive director and community rabbinic scholar for the Jewish Studies Initiatives of North Texas. He has 4 grown children and 12 grandchildren. We hope this episode is both informative and enriching, and if you enjoy conversations like this, subscribe to stay updated as we continue exploring different narratives within this complex and deeply human conflict. In this episode, we explore the moral reckoning that led him to seek out his Palestinian neighbours, the challenges of seeing the other as fully human, and the role that faith, humility and hard conversations play in building trust across a deeply divided land. This is a powerful conversation about transformation and shared humanity. Hanan, can you tell me a little bit about your upbringing, as well as how your Orthodox Jewish upbringing specifically has shaped your understanding of the world?
Well, actually, I wasn't brought up Orthodox. I wasn't brought up religious at all. My parents and my family are Jewish, and we had a pretty strong Jewish cultural identity. But my parents didn't give me much of a Jewish religious education. There was no Jewish observance at home. My deeper connection to Judaism and Jewish observance developed at the end of high school when I was about 17, and then it took a few years for it to mature. I take that back. It hasn't matured yet.
And so, have you always lived in Israel? Did you make Aliyah? Where do you come from? Where are your roots?
I was born in New York. We lived in a suburb of the city, about an hour from the city. And when I was 16, I came to Israel for a summer. When I was 18, I came to Israel for a year. And by the age of 20, I had made Aliyah. I had come to Israel.
Okay. And what inspired you to engage in dialogue with Palestinians? Tell me a little bit about your life living in Israel.
I'll tell a few stories. One is that although I've been living in Israel since I was 20, at a certain point, I went to the US to serve as a rabbi there for a few years. I was in Dallas, Texas, in the US. And in Dallas, I became involved in connection to Christian evangelical leaders who were supporters of Israel. And I worked with them in order to further their support for Israel. But out of that grew a certain interest in Christianity and interfaith dialogue on my part. And I began to meet other Christian leaders who weren't necessarily evangelical, who weren't supporters of Israel, who weren't conservative as those that I'd met earlier were. And then I began to meet Muslim religious leaders. And in the end, I founded an organization called Faiths in Conversation to further Jewish, Christian, Muslim theological dialogue there in Dallas. And I eventually found that it was extremely meaningful to me. I was discovering truths. I was discovering insight. I was discovering passion and commitment and sincerity and meaning among people who held very different religious beliefs than I did. And I felt I was expanded humanly and religiously, spiritually, such that when I left Dallas, Texas, this is 2013, and began the process of moving back home to Israel, I decided that I wanted to duplicate to a certain degree, in a certain sense, what I was doing there in Dallas in Israel. That's number one. So now when I began in Israel to search out Muslim and Christian religious leaders, theologians to dialogue with, I pretty soon came to the conclusion I was doing something very wrong, because I began to realize that there in Dallas, in the US, Jews, Christians, Muslims had a common language, a common civic sphere. We spoke English, we're part of the same culture, we shopped in the same supermarkets, we voted in the same elections, and we had a difference in religion, so we can talk about that on the basis of our commonalities. But I began to realize that here in Israel, we don't have any commonalities, we don't have any common language in any sense. And my conclusion was, wow, I don't know any Christian, Muslim human beings. Why am I trying to meet theologians and talk about religion? First, go and meet human beings and talk about being human beings. And it was only then that I began to realize how narrow my horizons are here where I lived. I just don't know anyone who's not Jewish. So I began my journey. Now I have another story that I don't know how it fits in chronologically to what I just told. It's about the same time, the end of 2013, beginning of 2014. So I'm driving my car where I live in Israel. And by the way, at that time, I didn't know that I don't live in Israel. I live in the West Bank, but I thought it was Israel then. I learned later that it's not formally part of Israel. So I'm driving near my home, and I have two evangelical pastors from the US as guests. They'd come on a spiritual biblical pilgrimage to the Holy Land to see the fulfillment of biblical prophecy, see how the prophecies of Isaiah and Jeremiah and others are coming true today, that the sons and daughters of the ancient Israelites are coming home as predicted, and they wanted to live it through me. So I talked to them, I showed them around, I showed them the forests we planted and the roads we paved and the settlements and the synagogues, institutions that we've created in the past decades. And as we're driving, I saw on the side of the road a hitchhiker, and I picked him up. After a few minutes, I saw another young man hitchhiking, picked him up as well. And then after a short ride, the two young men asked to get out of the car. So I stopped, let them off. We started to drive again. And then one of the pastors said to me the following words. He said, Hanan, you just taught us a lesson in Jewish ethics. You picked up hitchhikers. That was great. No one does that in Texas. And I responded and said, you know, it's not just me. Around here, we all pick up hitchhikers. We have a common vision. We trust each other. And just like everyone else, I try to do my best to pick up every person who puts out his finger for a ride. And by the time I finished that sentence, I realized that I was lying. I was lying to the two pastors and I was lying to myself. I said what I believed, what I thought, that I pick up every person. But it dawned on me very, very severely at that moment that I pick up only Jews, that I'd never picked up a Palestinian, even though they're 85, 90% of the population. And I understood that what that meant is that I don't see the Palestinians, or I don't see them as human beings. And we got discussion in the car, me and the two pastors, and it got deep, it got spiritual, it reached to some moral foundations. And I said that I have a moral blemish. I have to find a way to fix it, to remedy it, to heal it. And I said what I want to do is find a way to turn the Palestinians into human beings in my eyes. The way I'm going to do it is to meet them. And that's where my journey began, of trying to meet my neighbors.
You have co-founded, and I'll emphasize the word co-founded, the movement organization Roots, or as you refer to it in Hebrew, Shorashim, Judur in Arabic. How did you lead to co-founding it with a Palestinian?
Yeah, so there was no intention in my mind of founding an organization. What happened is that in my journeys towards meeting my Palestinian neighbors, I was invited to a little gathering of Israelis and Palestinians. I had no idea what it's about. So I left my home with a map that I had one day. It was about a 25-minute walk through the fields around my house. And I came to the place of the gathering. It was a Palestinian farmstead surrounded by a stone fence, a metal gate at the entrance. I walked inside. And remember, I'm stopping for a second. I'd never met a Palestinian before, really, never had a conversation with a Palestinian. So I walk inside and I see something that I couldn't believe. I saw 15 Israelis and 15 Palestinians doing the strangest thing. They were talking to each other, and that doesn't happen where we come from. Never. They're in little groups. And I saw then a Palestinian woman standing alone, not talking to anyone. And she's in brown from head to toe, only her face is visible, clearly an observant Muslim. So we said hello, we started to talk after I walked up to her. And very quickly I said to her, I can't believe I'm talking to you. And she responded, I can't believe I'm talking to you because we don't talk to Israeli settlers. And I really didn't understand why she said that, but she kept talking. It seemed to be fine. And then her son walked over. She introduced me. She said his name is Yazin, and he's 17 years old. So Yazin and I shook hands and started to talk. And I see he's wearing a windbreaker, and on the jacket are 3 words, seeds of peace, in English, seeds of peace. And I remember being very jarred by what it says in his jacket, because he's a Palestinian. And the last thing I'd expect from a Palestinian, given my mindset at that point, is that he wears a jacket that has the word peace on it. I was totally flabbergasted. So I said to Yazin, what's this seeds of peace thing? And I'm really expecting, he says, I don't know if someone gave me the jacket, but that's not what he said. He said it's the name of summer camp in Maine, USA. And it takes Israeli kids and Palestinian kids out of the conflict zone for a summer of recreation and reconciliation. And he told me he was in that camp for that past summer, and he had a great time. He met Israeli kids. He said they're friends on Facebook. And then he told me that he was so changed by meeting Israelis that now he wants to spend some of his life building bridges of peace between our two peoples. And I remember listening to what he's saying and not knowing if I can believe what he's saying, because it contradicted everything that I knew to be true. And you could say that Yazin and his mother Tzadiah were the first Palestinians that began the process of deeply unsettling me. And then his father walked over and I talked to Jamal. And he looks Palestinian, and he looks, in my eyes, frightening. And I really can't believe that I'm talking to this guy, and he tells me he's a peace activist, and it just doesn't make sense. He told me about his process of first meeting Israelis and how he was afraid of them and how he was really disgusted by shaking the hands of a Jew, of an Israeli, and how he eventually told me that he met a human being who turned out to be a partner, and that changed him. And I can't believe that this Palestinian tells me he's been changed. And I'm getting so just undone and challenged. And that day that I met Jamal and his wife and his son. I met other Palestinians, and I met the Palestinian who was the head of that convening. His name was Ali Abu Awad. And Ali talked to the whole group in perfect Hebrew that it turns out he learned for many years in Israeli jail. And he told the story of his family's life and of his life in a fashion that was the exact opposite of what I thought was true. About Israeli jail, about the soldiers, about injustice done to him. It was terrible. It was a terrible experience listening to him. And I remember having a sense I should get up and tell him he's lying. You can't be. We don't do the terrible things he's describing. But on the other hand, he wasn't giving a political speech. It was only to describe his life. So I didn't get up and contradict him. But I went home that day completely undone. I heard things that can't be, that contradict the foundations of my identity and everything that I know to be true. And I remember after a few days feeling nauseous, just trying to struggle over the things that I heard. And at that point, I really couldn't go on with my life. And I went back and to the same place I first met Ali and Jamal, the others, and we started to talk. And a group grew around Ali and Jamal and Israelis and Palestinians, local people meeting local people. And organically, Roots was created, not intentionally.
So how long ago was this process or this epiphany of this undoing?
This was the last Wednesday of January 2014. And that's
Okay.
years ago.
So that's what, yeah, 10 years ago. You sound like an incredibly passionate man, and this is wonderful to hear. In the lives of many folk, very little changes, or at least it changes very slowly over a period of 10 years where we don't notice. There's been a lot of issues, struggles, wars, fighting that have occurred within the Israeli-Palestinian sphere over the last 10 years. When I go online, and I suppose in a sense when you're scrolling through a lot of peace groups, you get a lot of propaganda, a lot of anger, a lot of pain. You then get the kind of knee-jerk reaction that comes from the others as well, particularly over the course of the last number of years since October the 7th, before that in 21 and 14 and so on and so forth. What are some of the biggest challenges that you face in bringing Israelis and Palestinians together?
The challenge is human nature, apparently. The challenge is what I've heard some people call our reptile brain, our prehistoric past that causes us to circle the wagons and create a mentality and a sociology of them against us. It causes us to put blinders on and live within our own people's story, old people's reality, and not to see there's another reality, there's another story out there, there's another people, there's another existence. It amazes me, but of course, it shouldn't amaze me because this is the reality. It amazes me that I had lived 34 years in an area that's mostly Palestinian and had never met one. And they were two-dimensional, they were transparent, they didn't have any reality. I didn't know anything of their story. They were just the enemy. They were just dangerous. And most Israelis today, and perhaps I should say more than most, almost all, especially where I live, they don't see the Palestinians. They have no idea. They paint everything with this thick brush. They're all the same. They're all terrorists. And the Palestinians did the same thing. See the Israelis as all just conquerors, as terrible people. So that our challenge is overcoming human nature, and that perhaps that's one of the reasons why I don't have any magic solution. There is no magic solution, but through bring the two sides together in a certain fashion that I will mention right now, we find that people are able to expand their identities, to see something of the reality and the truth and the legitimacy of the other side. So let's put on the table like the way I organize this. First is discovering the humanity of the other side. And it's really hard because it sounds crazy, but we don't subconsciously, we don't think they're human. Israelis towards Palestinians, Palestinians towards Israelis. And then you're jarred when you see that they're human, that they're not the monsters you thought you were trained to see. And you're sometimes embarrassed that you, that you that you're surprised at what you discover. That work of humanizing others is important and difficult, but there's something more important and more difficult. That's the second stage, which is this, what I call identity reconciliation. Discovering that the other side is not just a human being, but they're the bearer of a national, political, religious identity that has some legitimacy. It's so hard because what the other side thinks about themselves and what they think about you contradicts what you think about them and what you think about yourself. And then to accept that there is something in what they think about themselves and even in what they think about you doesn't mean that you have to reject your own identity, but it means you have to expand your identity. That you are true and your people are right and your people belong to the land, but the other side are also true and they also belong and they also have some justice and legitimacy on their side. So, and this is a process of healing. It's a process of healing from the way we usually construct our identities, which I call the hubris of exclusivity. We only see our own side. And we begin, like I said, to open up. Now, how do we do this? Again, if I had I don't have the solution, the exact formula, but it's about very much not dialogue. It's not about dialogue. It's rather listening, creating a framework and atmosphere in which the two sides tell their stories and listen to the other side's stories. It's excruciatingly difficult because the stories contradict each other, and you feel often you're a traitor for listening to other side stories. The listening of the side stories is a crossing of red lines. But like one of my Palestinian partners has said in public a few times, only by crossing all his personal and societal red lines did he become the better person he is today. Did he discover the truths that he knows today?
So while you're talking, I'm also thinking about how your Jewish spirituality has played a role in shaping your focus on peace and reconciliation. How does your sense of Jewish observance help to contribute towards building the bridges?
I want to give a certain introduction to this. I have Palestinian partners, Muslims, and I have Israeli partners, Jewish, who believe very, very strongly that their religion, whether it's Islam or Judaism, is being perverted by the extremists to promote hate and violence. And they further believe that the work that they're doing in promoting peace and reconciliation out of, through their own religious traditions, is restoring the true Judaism or the true Islam. And I don't share those beliefs. I am, you can say, more, it's hard to say. I in a certain sense, I'm more let's say I'm more objective about it. In other words, I cannot claim that my version of Judaism, my peace-loving Judaism, my Judaism reconciliation, and of accepting the other, I can't claim that that is the one authentic Judaism. No, I know that, in my opinion, there are many Judaisms. There are many versions of Judaism, and I can't claim that mine is better or truer or more authentic than the others. So I'm not in this crusade to uncover the true Judaism. My crusade is different. My crusade is that I want my version of Judaism to be more accepted, but I don't claim it's the only one. And those who disagree with me in understanding Judaism, they also have a leg to stand on. I have to admit that there are so many different contradictory sources in our tradition. Okay, so that's my my introduction. So I have to admit that I really wasn't pushed on this journey by religious beliefs. I was pushed on this journey, like I said, just first in the beginning, to discover other human beings, Christians and Muslims, and to discover their theology and the depth of what they think. And I was certainly expanded religiously and spiritually by meeting the other. But the motivation wasn't religious. It was something, I think, deeper inside me, just a conviction that that human beings are holy. And again, that sounds religious, but it didn't come from any religious sources. It came from something deep, much deeper inside me, that just human beings are good, human beings are holy, and that killing each other and hating each other doesn't have to be. It's an aberration. I'll tell you that when I go to New York City and I see human beings who are so different in their beliefs and their color and their ethnicity, and they're not killing each other, I say, wow, that's great. That's the way it could be and it should be. Why can't we do that here in Israel, Palestine? I'm just so pained by the way our reptile brains cause us to hurt other people. It just doesn't have to be that way. It makes me cry. So after the fact, after I got involved in peacemaking, then of course I went back to my tradition. I saw all the sources that contradict what I was doing, all the sources that support what I was doing. So of course, today I teach those sources that support what I'm doing, right? I try to propagate them.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you say that. I probably should have caveated my question with a recognition that when we talk about Judaism, in reality, we're talking about Judaisms. It's not a monolithic faith. Even within the commonly recognized particular, for want of a better word, okay, I'm thinking from with my little Catholic Christian brain here, of denominations where you've got the Reconstructionists, you've Orthodox, you've Reformed, and so on and so forth. But also within Islam, even within Sunnism, you have so many different expressions, different schools of Islamic law, local customs that impact and influence how people think on a social level and on a familial level as well. So yes, you're absolutely right to point that out in that, you can find a Jewish person who has a completely radical perspective on the right, who is dedicated to expanding this concept of Greater Israel. And then, of course, on top of that, within a Palestinian nationalist framework that borrows heavily from those Salafi sources, to promote their agenda that Palestine is an Islamic gift from God, and so, but that's the beauty in a sense of religion, in that there are those opportunities to not necessarily reinterpret scripture, but I suppose you could say that as well, to reinterpret the writings of rabbis as well as imams that promote a moderate path forward, a path of compromise, a path of mutual humanity, which is very, very important. It's just very similar to how it is within Christianity, of a social justice movement within a Christian context. And I think that that's a very important element of the discussion, is to win back those arguments from the extremes that feed off each other, the polarization, without losing focus of the fact that as humans, as a humanity, as cultures and societies, that we have been pained, and that justice is also a central component of that and the pursuit of it. Um, Thinking about the idea of a grassroots activism, a grassroots building of relationships between Israelis and Palestinians within your personal experience, how can conversation, the coming together, the integrating, the recognition of other people's humanities influence political leadership? How do organizations like Roots impact and influence the political landscape, which is polarized at present?
We have to divide between influencing local politics on the one hand and influencing national politics on the other hand. Locally, a number of Palestinian mayors have participated in the work of Roots, and 2, 3 Israeli mayors, perhaps there's one more, have been involved in some of our work. And we have certainly been able to create back channels of communication between local mayors on both sides. And this has absolutely led to small improvements in local issues, whether it's sanitation or access to land or sidewalks. And in certain cases, we've been able to prevent violence through these back channel communications. Now, I'll add that these back channel communications are not only between Israeli and Palestinian local mayors, we've also created channels of communication with the Israeli army. And there are sometimes elements in the Israeli army that want to uproot and prevent settler violence, in other words, Jewish violence against Palestinians, but they don't have the tools. For example, they don't have eyes and ears on the ground. We in Roots are able to be their eyes and ears on the ground through our network of Israelis and Palestinians. And when we hear about violence being fomented, we're able sometimes to alert the army, and sometimes they're able to prevent it, sometimes not. And if I'm talking about settler violence, we also work with parents and teachers and rabbis who may have some influence over the young settlers. I mean, we're talking at the ages of 15 to 24 usually, who out of ideology and also out of psychological difficulties are doing tremendous damage to Palestinian property and are injuring and hurting and sometimes in rare cases killing Palestinians. And we are working against that, again, in back channels. And we think there have been some fruits to our labors. And by the way, we're also working against Palestinian violence in the same fashion. It's not enough. There also has to be a concerted effort on the political level, of course, to want to combat this settler violence on the Jewish side. And that political will does not exist today. We're doing something, not much, but something.
Yeah, yeah. So, we spoke about how within the Orthodox community, like I'll give you in a sense a story, an experience. Like when I lived in Jerusalem, I spent most of my time living in Arab East Jerusalem, around the Nablus Road, Mount of Olives, and places like that. Um, and in order to access Zion Square in Jerusalem and Jaffa Street and King David Street, I often walked through Mea Shearim, and there was a sense of curiosity. They were a very insular community. They wanted to protect themselves from maybe influences from the outside world. There was a dress code, and different things like that. There was general hostility and suspicion to outsiders. Now, to say Orthodox Jews, to many people, it conjures up an understanding of the type of dress, but in reality, they are very different from one another, coming from different backgrounds, Ashkenazi, Mizrahi, Sephardi, as well as some of the different rabbis that they follow and are inspired by the particular works. What is the idea, from your experience, of peace and reconciliation within the Orthodox community, within Jerusalem, within other areas of the country? Again, of course, I recognize that there's a huge spectrum of different opinions here, but what kind of support or resistance have you received from within your own community towards developing relationships with Palestinians?
Okay, so we have to put on the table the sad reality, which is that sociologically in Israel today, among Jews, the more religious you are, the more alienated you are from peace and reconciliation with the other side. The more religious you are, the more you're filled with resentment and sometimes hate of the other side, of Palestinians. And I'll say that as a religious person, this is devastating and demoralizing and brings up for me in my heart deep questions. If my religion is today in the 21st century serving primarily here in Israel, Palestine as a vehicle for conflict, as fuel for conflict, as exacerbating conflict, then I feel alienated from my own religion, and I experience deep consternation in the fact that it's a force for evil. It's a force for evil today. So I just want to put out there that I'm living with that, and that's just terrible and difficult.
Yeah, yeah.
So it means that, first of all, the work of Roots is explicitly primarily among religious Jews. We focus on the settler population in Judah, Samaria, the West Bank, the Palestinian territories, with the Jews who live there, who are mostly right-wing and mostly religiously observant Orthodox. That's our constituency. We chose for ourselves what we call the heart of the problem. Other peace organizations are working with other constituencies. We're just about the only one working with this constituency. So we are selling a product that very few people want to buy. Right? I said it very cynically. So we have to promote our product in a fashion that doesn't fully reveal or emphasize its ultimate meaning. So let me give a few examples. We obviously bring together Israelis and Palestinians, Israeli settlers and Palestinians. We find that it's obviously difficult to get people to come to activities. When we bill it as Jews meeting Muslims, as opposed to Jews meeting Palestinians, it's much easier to get people to come. It's still difficult, but it's easier because it takes the political aspect out of it. Just coming to meet Muslims, okay, perhaps I have some curiosity concerning Muslims, I'll come. That's one important point. Another important point is obviously to have food there. Another point is to often arrange things in the framework of religious celebration. In other words, to tap into the religious calendar and life cycle that my people are experiencing, that they live by. How much success have we had? So before October 7th, yes, we brought thousands of Israelis and thousands of Palestinians to one or two or three activities, whether it's a summer camp for little kids or photography workshops for middle school kids or our youth movement for high school kids or for adults, or language classes and political lectures and religious interfaith dialogue, sports events, storytelling, playback, trauma therapy, music. So thousands of people that were exposed to the other side. And that's wonderful. That's positive. Hundreds of those people, I think, were transformed on some level to expand their identities, which is what we need to, after we scale it up a millionfold, that's what we need to solve this conflict. But then come October 7th, and even less people are coming to our events. Hearts are completely closed, almost completely closed. And there's been backsliding. In other words, some of the people that I said, that I felt were partially transformed by the other side, they've gone back to their earlier positions. Hopefully that will be short-lived as some of the acute trauma passes, but I can't be certain. So it's not clear. Let me put it this way. We've had effect on the micro level of changing some people. And we've had, like I said earlier, an effect on the local level of local leaders and mayors and violence. But we're far, 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 far from having any effect on the macro level, on the national level. And that's very painful for me.
Yeah. And I really, really respect everything that you've said. I really do. Just to listen to your heart as you speak, it's almost like a waltz in a sense where you're back and forward and back and forward. There's the dynamic of hope and despair and hope and despair and hope. And I'm sure it's difficult. I'm sure it's difficult in spite of everything, in spite of all the experiences. Is there something that gives you hope for the future, something that just keeps you going in this pursuit, in this path towards reconciliation and peace?
I've seen that I was transformed by meeting the other side. I have seen that hundreds of other people have been transformed by meeting the other side on both sides. So I know it's possible. It's not probable that we will bring peace in my generation, but it's possible. Because if these transformations happen to a critical mass of resistant Palestinians, we'd have a different reality. We would have peace and reconciliation. So the inspiration comes from what I've undergone and what I see other people have undergone in Roots and other organizations. And to go back to something I said earlier, secondly, is that human beings can live together. It happens in New York. It happens in places around the world. Conflicts have been solved in Northern Ireland, right? There are changes that happen in the social psychological dynamics between ethnic groups, between peoples, between religions. So it's absolutely possible. I have this faith in humanity, faith that it can be different. We don't have to kill each other, and that it's ultimately ridiculous and it's stupid. It's just stupid to kill each other. And I think human beings can not be stupid.
As we wrap up today's episode, I want to express my deepest gratitude to our guest Rav Hanan for his openness and willingness to share his personal views, experiences, and rich stories. Looking ahead to our next episode, we'll be speaking with Dr. John McMullen, the Programme Director of the Doctorate in Educational, Child and Adolescent Psychology at Queen's University Belfast. He is a practicing educational psychologist within the Education Authority in Northern Ireland, a chartered member of the British Psychological Society and Senior Fellow at the Higher Education Academy. In the upcoming episode, we will be speaking about the psychological impact of conflict on children, developmental and intergenerational effects, the Israeli-Palestinian context, and the role of education and schools, among other things. Until then, I would like to thank you for listening today. Don't forget to subscribe or follow us if you are interested in this content. And if you have any thoughts, feedback or questions, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach out via email at israelpalestineunpacked, all one word, @gmail.com, or connect with us through our Facebook page. All the contact details are listed in the description below.